You think of horror as a genre, something you choose to tickle your nerves or just to enjoy the atmosphere. But what if I tell you that horror is not just frightening stories, it's a way of communication, a language. Because just like any other language, horror operates through a system of signs.
You see, underneath every haunted house, every spooky forest, every demon, every vampire, there is a meaning. Something that's encoded in a recognizable form and has to be decoded.
Decoding, or translation, if you may, usually happens with the help of global cultural and deep personal experience, and what's the most important, it usually happens naturally, intuitively, without any effort from outside, because we've done this for centuries.
Horror is almost a universal language and feels coherent across completely different media, culture, and centuries. And by centuries, I mean it's been with us since the dawn of humanity, through the culture of spoken tales and mythology.
By the way, that was the era when decoding process was essential for human being, because through horror stories, world was usually explained, including its dangers.
The point is that back then, no one was embracing horror for the sake of entertainment. It had a purely practical purpose. And it's been like this until the era of Gothic literature, filled with mysteriousness and symbolism.
Oh, and also nowadays it has finally become relatively safe to enjoy horror, because believe me, no one would like to have additional tension or discomfort in the Middle Ages, for example.
Yes, nowadays this decoding process isn't vital. It's just for fun, plus the horror vocabulary got enriched throughout the centuries. So now you can choose the topic and dive into its multifacetedness.
For instance, I'm a huge lighthouse enthusiast. I'm eternally fascinated by the fact that on one hand, lighthouse is the undying symbol of hope, but on another hand, we observe the isolated structure in between of the raging ocean and its darkness, and we interpret it as a pressure of solitude and desperation. There is no hope, only madness. Or monsters, sometimes both.
Speaking of monsters, it's another universal code of horror, when through distorted body and non-human anatomy and all sorts of threatening behaviors we understand the amplification of extreme impulses, loss of boundaries between self and other, and of course, moral or psychological distortion made visible.
Monster language can go in so many different directions depending on which movie, game, manga, book, or piece of art you take.
For instance, monsters in Silent Hill are the signification of the ugliness of guilt and self-destructive impulses. Lovecraftian bestiarium of monsters is generally called to depict two things: the misery of mankind and danger of knowledge, because if we all remember, all his characters were going insane right after they figured out the truth about the monsters. In Clive Barker's Hellraiser, Cenobites symbolize not only lustful pain and painful lust, but also responsibility for the choices you make in life. And the last take is equally suitable for the apostles from Kentaro Miura's Berserk, yet their interpretation is much more complicated, first and foremost, because it's spiced up by the representation of desperation or radical egoism, often both.
Monsters are an incredibly juicy topic that surely deserves a separate video and not a single one.
But what makes this language of horror truly unique is not how we decipher each part of it, but what kind of emotions we experience. Emotional response is essential. Horror is nothing without emotions. It can be fully symbolic and meaningful, but in the end, it's emotions that play the vital role in perception of horror for each and every individual. Whether it's a brutal shock from a massive plot twist in the middle of the movie, like in Ghostland, for example, or sophisticated disgust when it comes to the movies like Ugly Stepsister or The Substance, the language of horror doesn't only seek to be decoded, it longs to be felt. Because all in all, emotions stabilize meanings into experience. And any emotion will do, except for indifference and boredom.
Dissolving horror into molecules and exploring darkness is one of my favorite things because there is so much to analyze, to compare, to reflect on, and to decode, of course. There are so many aspects of language of horror that didn't fit into this video because I planned to make it as a brief video essay. There are so many things ahead, so stay tuned to Kel Kashmar TV. Bye. Thanks for watching.